Hello and welcome to another video from yours truly at FF_Spaceman Dave Wright. It's a late night video tonight, folks. Want to get this video out. I've been trying to I've been trying to create it for about a week now. Um, but it's late night. It's gonna be a little bit more raw video. I'm one take, that's it. And I want to get this out here because Black History Month is over with. And my intention was to create a video on David Blackwell, a preeminent African American statistician, really a tremendous man, incredibly smart, really a genius. And I was inspired because of a patron at J Mike Check on Twitter. Everyone, I have a lot of respect for J Mike, but he did a thread throughout the month of February highlighting African American content creators in the fantasy football community. And I just really enjoyed that thread from J Mike. And I believe awareness and preaching, or not preaching, but focusing on Black history, the struggles that African Americans have gone through in our country, systemic racism, prejudice, hate, everything that goes into Black History Month, and focusing on individuals who've overcome all of those things to contribute so much to our society is important. And I kind of was actually inspired. I couldn't really think of anything to add to what J Mike had done except to enjoy what he shared on Twitter, on his thread. So everyone can probably check that out. If you're following me, you probably have seen what his thread highlighting different African American fantasy football content creators on Twitter. But I was at work a week ago. I work in a school, and I was just happened to be in the hallway, and someone from a student from the school had posted a bunch of flyers highlighting famous African American people who had contributed a lot to our society. And one of those people was David Blackwell, a statistician, and someone I'd never heard of. So I figured, oh, this is actually a great thing. I've been reading what J Mike's been putting out. Why not do some research on him? And then I'll do a video talking about his life and try to apply some of his teaching. I mean, stats, I can learn about, I should be able to synthesize what he did and provide some useful fantasy football information for people. Well, that's what I thought. And that was over a week ago now. And I've spent a significant amount of time reading up on David Blackwell and his work. And I've taken a couple stat courses throughout my lifetime, and I forgot most of it at this point. But after attempting to understand what he did, I feel a lot dumber than I did before starting this project. Just true. Yeah, I'm not sure how much fantasy football stuff I'm going to be able to apply in this video. There is some throughout that I will have towards the end, but I still felt that it was important to do this video because I'd never heard of David Blackwell, and I love statistics. I've taken several classes on the civil rights movement. I didn't know who David Blackwell was, and I actually felt shame about it. And so I figured, why not do this quick video? Hopefully it's quick, but recognize his achievements in the face of, like I mentioned, the systemic racism, inequality, and hate. I hope anyone who watches this video will enjoy it. I really learned a lot while trying to research for this video. And David Blackwell is just truly an extraordinary human being. And I want to try to get this out here in honor of Black History Month. So kind of just a quick biography. He was born in 1919, and he essentially, looking at his life, he lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, Vietnam, the Civil Rights Movement, and 9/11. I think he passed away in 2000, in the late, like 2010, 2011. But his dad was a railway worker. He was born in Southern Illinois, and which was like right on the Mason-Dixon line, essentially. And he actually attended at that time, he attended an integrated school, which was rare because there were several segregated schools throughout his town. He was very bright early on. He graduated at 16 after skipping several years of school. He originally wanted to be an elementary school teacher, but after enrolling for college at the Illinois Urbana-Champaign, I believe it's called, 6 years later, he became the first African-American in school history to graduate with a PhD in mathematics. Truly a brilliant guy. Some of his early work was on Markov chains, I believe. I'm not even going to bother trying to explain what the heck they are, but it was interesting trying to learn about that. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into these advanced mathematics stuff. However, after graduating with his PhD, he was awarded with a prestigious fellowship, and he went to the Institute of Advanced Study. And at the time, it was a custom for fellows to attend lectures at nearby Princeton University. However, Princeton objected to Blackwell's appointment, and he wasn't allowed to attend these lectures or even perform any lectures at Princeton or research at Princeton during his studies. It went as far as the president of Princeton University got involved, saying that the Institute of Advanced Study was abusing their relationship with Princeton for allowing Blackwell to even attend the Institute of Study, or IUS, or whatever it's IAS, I believe is the abbreviation. But just shows you at the time, and this is just briefly, there's one instance of racism that Blackwell had to endure. He said his parents actually growing up in the segregated school, or in the non-segregated school, sorry. I might have said early on it was a segregated school. It was a non-segregated school. He said his parents actually did a lot shielding him from racism, and he never really experienced it overtly until later. Until he would often later notice it later in life. So he never. That's something he would mention. Except we will see throughout this, there are several instances of racism, of prejudice that he did encounter. So after he got his fellowship, after he completed his fellowship at the IIS, he applied to over 105 historically black colleges and universities, but only 3 came back and he only applied to HBCUs because that was, at the time, that's kind of what was expected. There was no tenured professors at other universities. He did apply to several, like UC Berkeley, but he was rejected. But he had 2 short tenures at historically black universities and colleges and universities. And 2 years later, so he completed his fellowship in 1942. Then 2 years later, after 2 short tenures at smaller universities and colleges, he actually was accepted as an assistant professor at the famous Howard University in Washington, D.C. in 1944. And by 1947, he was the chairman of the math department. And while at Howard University, he started to dive into game theory, and where he wrote a book about the dualist dilemma, which is something I had never heard of. But it's essentially a dualist dilemma it involves any 2-person zero-sum game where, like rock, paper, scissors, or checkers, and he made significant contributions to game theory during this time. He published a book called The Theory of Games and Statistical Decisions in 1954. And that's still used as a seminal work in game theory today. Shortly afterwards, after he publishing the book, he actually was hired by UC Berkeley after being rejected 10 years earlier. And I found this interesting. The reason why he had been rejected from UC Berkeley was that he'd been denied the position because the head of the math department's wife objected to having a black man in her house during faculty dinner parties, which was the custom at UC Berkeley, that the women would host these parties frequently. And she would not, and direct quote, she would not have a darkie in her house. So Mr. Blackwell constantly came up against this racism, and he overcame, doing tremendous things. And just, I could go on and on about the individual works that he created, his individual honors. And then over the next 20 years, he would go on to write over 90 papers and books in the fields of statistics. He would become a leader in Bayesian statistics. And I think a lot of us have heard fantasy football analysts call themselves Bayesians because it's where a process of they adjust to new information. They don't want to have take lock. They want to process new information and then make new analysis based on the incoming analysis. So he was a thought leader on this, and he actually wrote I believe he wrote the seminal textbook in 1969. I don't remember the title off the top of my head, on Bayesian theory and something else, mini-maxing, I believe it was called. I'm not going to get into it, but truly, so he was moving on. So what else is he most famous for? So like I meant, he's famous for the Rao-Blackwell Theorem. He's a leader in probability theory, game theory, like I mentioned, information theory, and his work in sequential analysis has estimated to save over hundreds of millions of dollars in medical research funding and saved countless lives because he's optimized through statistics, optimized medical research studies in their processes. His renewal theory is heavily used in engineering, but through his other work, like the Rao-Blackwell Theorem, he is considered essentially his work is considered the foundation for today's machine learning and querying and programming. He is heavily, heavily involved in that. His work is, and I wish I could get into it more, but I didn't understand it. So I can't really pass anything on to you guys besides just what I read about it, just how important he was in the field of statistics. So other barriers that he went on to break during his career was he was the first African-American tenure professor at UC Berkeley. He was, and I've said this multiple times, but he was, by his fellows, he was considered the number one statistician in America, in the world, a thought leader. And I'm trying to look back through my notes here. And like I said, so in 1965, he became the first American member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. And just truly, truly a tremendous man. And he's shaped how our society is today. And I will share one small fantasy insight after reading this. And early on in Blackwell's career, he focused on measure theory, I believe it's called. And this is a very complicated and technical theory that involves a lot of math that I did not understand. But essentially, it talks about how to measure probability and the obstacles to measuring probability and measuring the different events that could happen, aka probability. So commonly in fantasy football, we measure things using average or ranks: average points per game, average draft position, hit rates, wide receiver 1, QB 1. That's how we measure things frequently in fantasy football. And the problem is we aren't measuring necessarily, that's the average isn't actually measuring probability. It's an average. It doesn't exist. Peter Howard talks about this in a recent episode of Dynasty Crossroads. I mentioned a bunch recently because of the research I've been doing on David Blackwell. So I just want to, and how do I want to frame it? What is the problem with the average? Is that we don't hit on 60% of our first round rookie picks. Jacob Rippergrove did a analysis a couple years ago talking about the hit rates of certain by round rookie picks and how successful we are using them. Those are averages. We don't hit on 6 out of 10 first round picks or 6 out of 12 or however you want to break down. I even remember the exact numbers. We can miss 3 or 4 picks in a row. We're talking about averages here. Same thing with average points per game. That's doesn't talk about the range of the scoring. It doesn't the volatility of a player scoring or the scope of an ADP. Saquon Barkley is going at 103 in some drafts, 104, or he's going in the mid-second round. If we don't understand the probability of these events in fantasy football, we're not making accurate valuations. If I'm basing my decisions on ADP or average points per game, instead of getting a complete picture, a complete range of outcomes, I'm not doing the best I can as a fantasy player. So I think assuming and counting on the average is a mistake. If we really get to know the range of outcomes in a player, it's not, hey, is this player going to hit or is he going to miss? Is that player, there's degrees of hitting, there's degrees of missing. Top 36, top 48. Maybe he has a streak of Jamison Crowder, a streak of 4 or 5 games in a row of high-end wide receiver 2 production. Understanding this, I think we'll have, and I'm not going to get into it too much more tonight. I want to wrap up this video. But understanding these things, we might have a less valuation on rookies because of understanding the risk, the volatility in making those picks, and probability, and understanding the more times a player in the NFL actually succeeds, even though he's getting older and potentially losing value, it's a safer bet to bet on the proven players. Who cares? Sometimes maybe an age curve is an average of production. It's not. It's wide. It is wide. You're going to find that if you really break down age curves in wide receiver production, those players who are extending the age curve are actually the elite of the elite. So if you look at actually the age curve, it might shrink. It's the elite players are actually stretching out age curve. So what does that mean? How should we value age and value? A lot of things go into probability, making assumptions what's going to happen. And that's kind of reading up on this one smidge of David Blackwell's work in measure theory. I'm not even sure if I interpreted measure theory correctly, to be honest with you, but this kind of is where it led me. I would like to talk about this a lot more, but I don't want to take the focus off of what David Blackwell did. Truly a great statistician, and he overcame a lot. And I really enjoyed doing this project. I hope people enjoyed watching this video. And as I wrap up, I just want to say thank you for watching. Be kind. Understand where people are coming from. We all have a vast different amount of backgrounds and life experiences. Try to reach out to and find that humanness in each other. Connect, find shared values, understand where each other's coming from, and let's have fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoyed talking about it. I hope you guys didn't hear too much of my furnace going off while I was talking, and the wind. It's a windstorm, but I had a lot of fun. After this video, kind of moving on to for Patreon too. I plan on shifting a lot more back into more of statistics and making additional spreadsheets. I've been zooming out, doing a lot more big picture, and I think I'm going to start moving back into writing some articles and coming up with some more spreadsheets and analysis, because I've zoomed out. It's time to zoom back in, baby. Hope you enjoyed my talk on David Blackwell. Truly a great man. Shout out again to J. Mike Check for his thread. And yeah, thanks for watching.